and it will turn damp for Northern Ireland, parts of Wales, as well as southwest Scotland. Temperatures holding up through the night because of the breeze. Most places will see lows of 10 to 12 Celsius, perhaps a couple of degrees lower under any prolonged clear spells. But it is a damp start to Thursday for Northern Ireland, Northern England, parts of North Wales, southern Scotland. That rain increasingly sinks south, weakens and turns more showery by the afternoon. Some sunshine between the showers, more settled by Friday.
Tonight on GB News, at 6, it's Dewbs Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV, on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, it's 6 o'clock. I'm Michelle Dewberry, and this is Dewbs Co, the show where we'll get into some of the things that have got you talking today. Now, I hear some strange things these days, and today was no exception. A little warning for you though, what I'm about to read is slightly explicit and may not be suitable for young children to hear. Here's the thing with girls 22 or under. They smell massively different to a girl of 28. Girls 16 to, say, 23 have this creamy, buttery, slightly sweet smell that is unbelievably magnetic. Those bizarre words were apparently tweeted just a couple of days ago by a man who has stood for election multiple times and was even listed by Preston Conservatives as their deputy chair for campaigning. Now, given that it feels like almost every other day now we hear a story about an MP being investigated for this or suspended for that, or even, as we heard yesterday, jailed, I'm wondering, do you think that enough is done to make sure that we only have the very best people in our political system? Because I fear not. And a group of millionaires have come together at Davos to beg almost that governments tax them more. Bit weird though, isn't it, when you consider that if indeed they are that desperate to pay more, they could of course just do so voluntarily. But nonetheless, do you think that we tax the wealthy enough, or should they be paying even more? And a ballot asking union members whether they wish to strike has just closed. If successful, it's going to wreak havoc across our country at a time when, let's face it, we need it least. So I'm wondering, do you think that unions are doing the right thing fighting this way at this time? Or are they pushing it a little bit too far? All that to come, but first, the latest news headlines.
The top stories this hour, the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, has written to the Metropolitan Police asking for a detailed explanation of the force's decisions over individual cases in the Partygate investigation. That's as leaked pictures published by ITV News show the Prime Minister raising a glass at an office gathering in November 2020 when a national lockdown was still in place. Boris Johnson had told MPs in Parliament there'd been no party that day. Downing Street is reportedly expecting to receive Sue Gray's report into lockdown parties tomorrow. Energy regulator Ofgem expects the energy price cap to rise by more than 40% in October. Appearing before a committee of MPs, the chief executive said households could be paying almost £3,000 a year. He says Russia's invasion of Ukraine means gas prices are volatile, and he called on the government to help those who'll struggle to pay.
Now, I know this is a very distressing time for customers, but I do need to be clear with this committee, with customers and with the government about the likely price implications for October. Therefore, later today, I will be writing to the Chancellor to give him our latest estimates of the price cap uplift. Now, this is uncertain. We are only part way through the price cap window, but we are expecting a price cap in October in the region of £2,800.
The number of confirmed monkeypox cases in the UK has now risen to 71, with 14 new cases identified in England. UK health officials believe the risk to the population remains low, but they're keeping their advice under review. The World Health Organization says the monkeypox outbreak is containable. A teenage boy who fatally stabbed a 12-year-old girl over a Snapchat video row has been found guilty of her murder. He's been warned he faces a life sentence. Ava White was stabbed in the neck in Liverpool city centre on the evening of November the 25th last year. The court heard how Ava and her friends became involved in an argument with the 14-year-old boy and 3 of his friends after the boys recorded Snapchat videos of the group. More than 20 members of Ava White's family erupted into cheers as the jury delivered its guilty verdict. The West Ham footballer Kurt Zouma has admitted kicking and slapping his pet cat. He pleaded guilty to 2 counts under the Animal Welfare Act. The 27-year-old was forced to apologise after a video of the incident was shared by his younger brother online. The Chief Inspector of the RSPCA, Dermot Murphy, told GB News why the case went to court.
Treating an animal in that way is just not acceptable, and we were genuinely shocked when we saw the footage. What makes this even worse is that this was videoed and thought appropriate to share online as well. And I think this case demonstrates we'd like it to make sure it reminds people that animals should be treated with compassion, respect and care, and that we will not tolerate cruelty.
The UK has condemned what it calls President Putin's despicable blockade preventing food exports from Ukraine. The government says it's continuing to work with international partners to help resume Ukraine's grain exports. It, however, has no current plans to deploy Royal Navy warships to the Black Sea to stop Russia's blockade of Odessa port. The Transport Secretary, Grant Shapps, told Sky News that famine caused by grain and food shortages due to the invasion of Ukraine could cause more deaths than the war itself. The Prime Minister says he has full confidence in the most senior civil servant at the Foreign Office, despite calls for his resignation. MPs are demanding Sir Philip Barton quit over what they say were deep failures of leadership during the evacuation of Kabul in Afghanistan. Sir Philip stayed on holiday until the operation was completed in August. The Foreign Affairs Committee says he showed a determination to avoid unearthing the facts. And as you've been hearing, over 130,000 plus journeys have already been made on Crossrail's Elizabeth line after it opened to the public this morning. Hundreds of enthusiasts from across the country queued in central London, hoping to be among the first passengers to ride the service. The Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, described it as a game changer that will benefit the whole country. On TV, online and on your radio via DAB+. You're with GB News. Now it's time for Michelle and Dewbs Co.
Thanks for that, Polly. Well, keeping me company until 7 o'clock tonight is my panel. The leader of the Social Democratic Party, William Clouston, commentator Andre Walker and Nigel Nelson, who's the political editor of the Sunday People. And you know the drill by now. I'm sure it's not just about us, it's about you at home. What's on your mind tonight? Get in touch with me and let me know your thoughts, either on what we're discussing or what you think we should be, that we're not. You can get in touch with me, gbviews@gbnews.uk. You can tweet me at Michelle Dewbs or at GBNews. Don't forget, if you haven't already, subscribe to us on YouTube, download our app, take us with you on the radio. We're everywhere, so wherever you are very welcome. And by the way, if you've just tuned in, you're thinking to yourself, is Michelle going to go on about Partygate tonight? You might be pleased to know, no, I am not. I cannot bear it. All this ridiculousness about these pictures and parties and Prosecco's. It is so absurd. I can't bear it. I don't even think I've got it in me to do it again tonight. I've always said, though, if you are a regular viewer, you'll know I've always said that if indeed there is a substantial development, then of course it would be remiss of me not to do it. So if indeed this report comes out, you know, I suppose I'll have to, won't I? I say it reluctantly, Nigel.
You will have to, I'm afraid, yeah.
I say it reluctantly, ladies and gentlemen.
This time tomorrow.
I just think, anyway, like, that's enough of Partygate. So if you're listening and you're thinking, is she going to get into it, that's me done for tonight. That'll do. I'll cover it another day. Right. Anyway, what am I talking about? Oh, yes, I'm talking about MPs. How can I forget? So I wouldn't normally be bothered, by the way, about a resignation of a would-be Tory councillor in Preston, but John T. Campbell, what a name, he's resigned after he tweeted about how young girls smell buttery and creamy. If you missed the start of my programme, I'll save you from me reading it out a second time, but I'll put it on the screen in case you are indeed interested as to what he said. It's offensive, bizarre and certainly very weird. But given that a Tory MP was jailed this week as well for sexually assaulting a young boy, and this is rife, by the way, this is not all these investigations and all this kind of stuff. This is not just about the Tories. There's 50-odd MPs under investigation at the moment, cross-party, and it kind of got me thinking about what are the checks and balances for people that want to serve in public office. I started doing a bit of digging, William. You are the head of a political party. It seems, surprisingly, that there's not kind of a generic kind of uniformed, you know, if you want to stand and serve in public office at whatever level, by the way, council or parliament, then these are the terms that you adhere to. It's not quite as straightforward as that.
Not really, no. Every party has its own system. I think what every party should do, I mean, certainly what we do in the SDP is do a CRB check, do a criminal records check. And you can't be a council candidate in our party without doing that. That's a minimum requirement. But, you know, the Tories have their sort of old-fashioned boards, don't they? They go away for a weekend and see if you can speak or debate or whatever. I've actually passed one of those in my brief time in the Tory party.
You slipped through the net.
Yeah, everyone has different systems. But, I mean, partly a story like this is very strange what this person said, but there are 20,000 councillors up and down the country. If you include parish councillors, even more thousands. So on the numbers, you're going to get some weird people creeping into the system, and parties will do their very best. I mean, even to be a member of our party, we'll check you out before you. I mean, very sensible if you join our party. But occasionally people come up, and if there's any doubt, we say no, we're not having you.
Andre Walker, what's the matter with you? Because whilst he's talking, whilst he's talking, you're shaking your head. What's going on?
It's just really easy when you've got 15 members to check them all out. It's a bit more difficult if you're the Labour Party.
A little dig there.
No, it's not a dig. And actually, you know, Nigel Farage is a presenter on this show, and he said it was incredibly difficult as party leader to justify every single person that had ever been associated with his political party. Look, I totally disagree with the premise of what you said, and I really disagree with you. But for me, it's not about the vetting. So I'm a Conservative. I was a Conservative political advisor, worked at City Hall, worked at Parliament, all the usual caper. We do the CRB checks, we do the background checks, we get references, we get even your some details from your financial history. But the critical point is, I live in a safe parliamentary seat. When we interview you for our parliamentary seats, and I'm not criticising my local MP, if you get the nomination for the Conservatives in my seat, then you'll win. And you will win for 30, 40 years. And absolutely no interest in that beyond what happens then. You know, you look at someone like Neil Parish. You know, the reason that Neil Parish was able to watch pornography in the chamber was the bloke.
Tractors.
Well, tractors, okay. Well, I mean, he loved tractors, okay. But you know, you're talking about somebody who, the day he was selected for Seaton and Honiton, it was a job for life, and he was never going to be scrutinised after that. So for me, it's not about the initial checks. It's about saying, why on earth can't we, after every single term, for every single councillor, for every single MP, say you have to have a full reselection?
Some parties do deselect people. I mean, yeah, Labour Party do that.
But it doesn't happen very often. No. I mean, I'm sick of this phrase, it's my seat. Well, actually, you know, if you were to... I mean, you've run businesses. If you were to employ somebody for 4 years, that would be reasonable. You wouldn't interview somebody for, say, Kensington and Chelsea and say, well, here's your job for 30 years without any scrutiny.
So you think that the parties, once you've successfully been elected, your reckoning is you've almost got to earn the right to keep that seat, so you would have regular kind of sanity checks, making sure that you are the right person for that job within the party.
I mean, I wouldn't go as far as what you've said, though I don't particularly disagree with it. What I would say is, look, you know, you win your selection for one term of office and you have to fight it again. You know, Nigel has spent years in Parliament. He's a young lad, but he spent a few years there. But you know, you will know that there are old lags who've been there for 30 years on all sides of the divide who really don't achieve very much, but because they're in such ultra-safe seats, they're never going to be scrutinised.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing you can have is if they do misbehave, you can have a recall. And a recall means that you need 10% of the electorate who would say that we'd like a by-election in that seat. So they're not, you know, they are scrutinised to an extent. And I think the problem here is that you do go through a proper process before you can become an MP, that they do go through your Twitter account, they give you the police checks, you need 3 references, and then you go through a pretty stiff selection board.
But you're on about the Tories. This isn't the same for Labour, or is it?
Well, it is. I mean,
it's quite similar.
It is broadly the same system across the board. The problem is when the system breaks down, and we've just seen that with Imran Ahmed Khan, who you've just mentioned, who's just been sentenced to 18 months, that his victim, a 15-year-old victim, wasn't 15 at the time, obviously, but he got in touch with the Tory party and told them this man was not fit to be an MP because of what he had done to him. Now, what we don't know is what happened to it after that. He made the complaint, that seems to be accepted, but the Tory party has no record of that complaint being made. Question is, why not? A serious complaint like that should go through into a procedure. It should be elevated really quickly to make sure that that is actually dealt with.
And sorry, just point of clarity. If I'm right in thinking, Nigel, the guy that's just been jailed, the cause for concern was actually reported to the police when it happened. I think it was about 2008. It was progressed, but it was logged with the police. So actually, theoretically, that should have been quite an easy thing to sanity check.
Not at all.
Why?
Because if you do a basic criminal records, what they call a DBS check, developer, you know, vetting and barring. That's only going to show up spent and unspent convictions. It's not going to show up arrests. It's not going to show up juvenile convictions. It's not going to show up cautions. Now,
so that would have still slipped through the net.
But remember something else about it. The reason it doesn't show up, and there will be people watching this show who have been arrested and criminally investigated and not prosecuted, who will say, well, why the hell should I be barred from public office because I was investigated and then effectively exonerated from those allegations?
Interesting. See, lots of people here are kind of that point that you just made about having a job for life. I wonder if that kind of does breed a bit of a sense of, I can relax now. Because I think if this, like in my job, for example, I think, right, OK, you've always got to try and do the best job that you can do. There's lots of people that will want to do this, that, the other. And I think you're always permanently on your toes. Whereas if you get elected in a safe seat, to your point, I think there are a lot of people that think, whoa, I can relax.
But just to explain to the viewers what your job really is, your job is to encourage people to watch the show in order to sell advertising revenue. So what you will know, and I don't know what it is, what your viewers are every single day, and you will be updated on that regularly. Look, If this show got 1 million viewers, whatever you did, no matter how good or bad you were, that would be the equivalent of being in a safe parliamentary seat. Even if these guys are dire, they will still win. Now, that doesn't mean that all of them are dire. It just means it doesn't make a difference.
It
That's the problem.
It doesn't say anything about the vetting process at the start. I mean, you can have a brilliant vetting process and you still won't know something. Something will crop up
That's
later.
true.
And that's what I talked about the population. What the interesting thing about politics is, you get stories like this about local councillors and UKIP councillors saying that, the gay marriage caused the floods, and it gets in the press. Very interesting. But what's a broader point is why MPs, people at the top, parliamentarians, appear to be overrepresented in terms of criminality than the general population. I mean, there's lots of problems.
It might be because they're more highly regulated. I mean, I don't know.
It could be, but do you accept it's a very interesting question?
Or the nature of a person who actually decides to go into politics is a risk taker.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think that that's the reason that they live on the edge. The whole power thing is it really sort of infects them, and because they know that it's a very slippery slope, you can be up one moment, down the next, and so on. They take risks, and that's why sexual misconduct, financial misconduct, I think, is so common amongst politicians.
But therefore, an issue for us always politically is that Parliament doesn't represent the divides, doesn't represent the hinterland. It really doesn't. I mean, Brexit proved that it doesn't. And so, on that basis, if Parliament represented the people more, were more representative, it would have less criminality.
But do you know, I discovered a statistic, right, and I'm not going to say the street, but there are more members of the House of Lords living on my street than there are in Lancashire. Now, that's because I live in the southeast of England, in a town called Windsor, and that's not the royal family. I'm not talking about the royal family. But when you're talking about over-representation, there are certain areas. Now, I'll tell you what, if I lived in Kensington and Chelsea, I reckon I would probably live in a borough that had more members of the House of Lords than probably the whole of North England.
But I found something interesting, and you'll know more than me if this is indeed your party, because the Tories, we mentioned that you need 3 references, but one of those references, correct me if I'm wrong, needs to come from someone within the party.
Yeah.
But you see, for me, this is where I think politics is fundamentally broken, because I think that really what we need is new, different people, like your average person coming through into politics. If you can only get into the Tory party, and one of the ways is you've got to know someone that's already in there, then you're just breeding more.
But there'll be a personal reference too. So, I mean, your 3 references, you need 3. You'll get it from your boss or employer.
Yeah.
You'll get it from
Is it possible one of your family's been through this recently?
Amazingly so, yes, absolutely.
Because you're meant to be a left-wing journalist.
But I'm on about the third one. So the third one.
And a personal reference.
I think it's incredibly difficult, because what's incredibly difficult is when Labour introduced this CRB thing, there was just this obsession with the idea that the minute you background check somebody, they're safe for life, right? The reality is, unless there's been an allegation made against you, unless somebody's going to say something about you, it's impossible to know. And I think the vetting is incredibly difficult. And that's why I say, and I know I'm banging on about it, that's why I say there needs to be a continual process of reappraisal. Just because I'm an appropriate person today, though I'm probably not, doesn't mean that I'd be appropriate in 1 year's time, for a variety of potential reasons.
I actually agree with that. I think that it breeds, and I think the media has a lot of responsibility for this, Nigel, because we do stuff like we put MPs on I'm a celebrity, get me out of here. I think that the media in this country contribute to this whole kind of notion of that an MP is somehow a god. They seem to think that they're somehow
Well, I don't think they should do that. I mean, I don't think they should go on shows like that. I think there's been a...
But hang on, Nigel, if you think about it, if you took off, if you said to the Mirror Group, who you work for, I'm taking 8 weeks off to go to the jungle, they would fire you.
Yeah, absolutely,
There is no mechanism to fire a Member of Parliament who takes 8 weeks off. If I decided as a Member of Parliament, the day I got elected, to never go to Westminster, to move to Barbados on the 100,000
We have had MPs who've done that.
They've done that.
Nothing would happen.
Some have done that.
Nothing would happen.
Well, Warren has just emailed in and said, Michelle, I think that nominated members of Parliament should be asked to sign the Official Secrets Act to stop leaks. He says, I hope this email actually gets to Dewbs Co. It did, Warren. What do you think to this, William? Should MPs be asked to sign the Official Secrets Act?
No, I don't think so. It's a separate category. I mean, it's a different category. The solution to all of this is to get a wider variety of people in Parliament. Parliament doesn't represent the people. It really doesn't. So
but anyone can stand for elections.
I know they can, but the process, the gatekeepers of this whole system are the two big parties and their selection processes. And funnily enough, actually, largely, the parliamentary parties are indistinguishable. They have very, very similar values. By the time they get there, went to the same universities, have the same
all
thoughts.
Very left-wing.
All liberals, actually, basically.
All very left.
And the answer to the question, by the way, is every MP is covered by the Official Secrets Act.
Yeah, so this
in the same way that everyone around this table is covered by the...
This is the bit that people don't understand. The only reason you sign it is to say you understand it. But actually, there is a process, by the way, Michelle, in answer to that question. What they tend to do with members of Parliament that are privy to secrets is they make them privy councillors, so they become the Right Honourable. Now, it sounds like it's just a title, but actually that binds you by a more stringent level of security.
Yeah, there you go, Warren. Does that answer your question?
Good knowledge, that.
Yeah, that is good knowledge. I wonder, because one of the things that I find slightly suspicious, Nigel, is that when it comes to all this thing that I've just said I won't mention, this whole Partygate stuff, there does seem to be one journalist who seems to be first in line for lots of the information. That journalist has, I think, a husband or whatever it is, that works in the civil service, etc. And there's a lot of questions being asked about how are some of these leaks allowed to happen. What's the answer to that? You're a journalist, you must get leaks.
I'm sure there are, and as a journalist, we don't discuss our sources, as you know. So I have no idea where those leaks came from.
Dominic Cummings.
And I wouldn't expect to be told.
But do you think that someone in the civil service or that someone close to MPs, etc., should be allowed to just leak? I mean, I remember...
Well, they're not allowed to, but I mean, obviously... I mean, people I've talked to involved in Partygate, when I've done pieces about it, they've done it because they think it's in the public interest to get that material out there. So they tell me about it, and I put it in the paper.
I agree with Nigel. When I worked in the House of Commons, when I worked at City Hall, when I worked for local authorities, I would see it as my duty, principally as a public servant, to disclose things that are potentially embarrassing to my employer. The reason is because you're not a political party is paid to shine up a politician. A public servant has a duty to look after the public interest.
But I remember, unfortunately...
Didn't always do it.
Unfortunately, I remember a bit too well something that I wish that I could unsee and I can't, which is that CCTV in the Matt Hancock. Do you remember
I'm not talking about that. You can talk about it.
No, I'm talking about that. What I'm saying is, it was, you know, I wish that I could unsee it. But what happens to the person who's leaked that footage?
There was an investigation and they didn't find them. So there was an investigation into how that video was made. I mean, the idea that Matt Hancock couldn't see the camera on the ceiling was...
No, the idea he filmed it deliberately as well. Do you know something? When I worked at City Hall, we had a major leak inquiry in our office. Right, and the reason... What actually happened was one of our assembly members had accidentally installed Ken Livingstone's printer on his computer and was printing out loads of confidential. The reality is, these leak inquiries never go anywhere. Nobody has any clue what's going on. It's a waste of time.
It can be necessary, though, for public servants, actually, for officers to occasionally...
And they should be protected.
And they should be protected. Whistleblowing is very important.
Well, Joan from Devon says, Michelle, tell that guy on the left, she means you, Andre, to stop turning his back on the man far left from you. She means William. She said it's very bad manners.
I don't know what I'm supposed to do.
I'm going to tell him.
I'm going to move the shirt back.
Yeah, I'm going to tell him. I might even give him a quick slap in the commercial break. We'll sort it out. We'll see you guys. Going to take a quick break. We'll see you in a couple of minutes. When we come back, I want to talk to you about whether or not we should tax the wealthy more. And I also want to ask about unions and strikes. We'll have that in just a couple of minutes.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio. On digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you. And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Coming up on The Mark Steyn Show, after fierce opposition plans to place around 1,500 asylum seekers close to Linton-on-Ouse, one MP tries to get Home Office plans scrapped during a debate in Parliament. In Davos, a Chinese company admits it is developing a carbon tracker to monitor what you buy, eat and where you travel. Journalist Andrew Lawton is in Switzerland for that. Plus, Peter Hitchens is back to explain why he thinks it's a good idea for England to split from the rest of the UK. All that and more on The Mark Steyn Show from 8 o'clock.
Hello there, welcome back to Dewbs Co with me, Michelle Dewberry. Just a quick reminder as to who's keeping me company until 7 o'clock tonight. We've got the leader of the Social Democratic Party, William Clewson, commentator Andre Walker and Nigel Nelson, who's the political editor of the Sunday People. Now, let's talk strike, shall we? I didn't strike Andre, by the way. I just had a little jerk before I went to the break, and I've already been told on my email that I shouldn't jerk about slapping. So you'll be pleased to know, Andre.
You have a happy slap,
I left you well alone. You'll be pleased to know. We just had stern words.
I was devastated.
We had stern words in the break, so we did. But let's talk strike, shall we? Because I'm wondering, are we about to head into a summer of strike action? The biggest rail union, the RMT, has balloted its members on whether or not to strike over pay and conditions. I think actually it just closed. I think the ballot closed about 5 o'clock tonight, so we'll know tomorrow if this is going to affect railways up and down the country. This is different, by the way, to some of the chat you might have heard recently about London and whether or not tube strikes will be hitting the Jubilee weekend. With all this talk about strikes, the government is saying now it's thinking of introducing new laws to force minimum staffing numbers, which would essentially make strikes illegal. Nigel Nelson, pick up with you first on this. Where are you on it?
Well, I'm absolutely appalled the government is trying to end the right to strike, because this is what it amounts to. Whether you believe in this particular dispute or not is irrelevant. That workers must have the right to go on strike, and for that strike to work. I used to be a union rep. I mean, in newspaper terms, it was a shop steward, basically. I always felt that if I'd led our members out on strike, I'd failed. So all the way through, I was looking for a way of negotiating. But the whole point of that is, without having that in your back pocket, you don't have any negotiating clout. So the right to strike should be just that, a right to strike. And if the government is bringing in laws to ruin that, to stop effectively stop the strike having any point at all, that is taking away the last bastion the unions have to be able to try and get decent conditions. And if you look at the way, over the last 50 years, the way that wages have gone down and the difference between the top and the bottom. So 50 years ago, boardroom pay would be 60 times the average worker. It's now 180 times. Somewhere along the way, someone's got to try and redress that balance, and that's where the unions come in.
And we're going to come on to this kind of the whole wealthy and tax of the wealthy in a couple of minutes. But for now, before I just bring in the other two, do you think, because you just said basically you should have it in your back pocket, have the right to do that, but do you not think there should be some limits? I mean, we are in a situation now, you know, a lot of the country is on its knees. People are really struggling with their finances. We've got a war in Europe, which is going to have larger consequences here. We've had everything up and down coronavirus. We've just had coming out of Brexit. Surely what we need now is a little bit of stability.
Yeah, I hope there won't be a strike. I hope that actually that the RMT can negotiate a settlement with the rail companies, and we don't get there. But the point I'm making is that if you don't have that chance of doing it, if you can't go out on strike, you're never going to get to that negotiating position. You're never going to get decent wages. So that's why I think they should do it. And I've never heard, by the way, of a strike going ahead that people didn't object to for a whole load of reasons, whatever they might have been at the time.
William, I'll bring you in, but just to be clear, by the way, so 50% of the members need to vote in this ballot, 40% of them need to vote yes to the action for it to go ahead. William, where do you stand on all this?
I think we're in for a very difficult 6 months, year and a half, actually, largely because of loose fiscal policy and loose monetary policy, and you've got inflation taking. So it's a bit like the 70s, isn't it? We're going to have some chop. I think I accept. I mean, in principle, you've got to have the right to withdraw your labour. I accept that, but there are situations. Prison officers can't strike. It's very rare for the police to strike. Yeah. So there are categories where you'd say strategically, actually, we're not going to accept that, and we have a different situation. The SDP is in favour of railway nationalisation. We want the railways to be an emblem of pride and invest in them and have a proper system from Caithness to Cornwall. If the RMT got very militant, I could see a case for no strike clauses, and I could see a case for the government having a remuneration committee.
You just said if we get very militant.
We're not there yet. I mean, despite what you had with Southern Rail, which was appalling, and that did inconvenience a lot of people. It's very, very difficult. But I don't think we're there yet. I think we've got to the stage where you describe people that work on the railways in the same category as prison officers.
Andre?
Well, look, I mean, let's just be clear on something. What we forget in this country is the labour and trade union movement, whatever you think about it, dragged the civil and human rights of this country out of the toilet. When we had the Industrial Revolution, it was vital that people started working towards having their own rights. Look, the prohibition of strike, the opposite of that in many cases is slavery, and I'll tell you why. Because if you are obliged to be here, then it's no longer a job, it's an act of slavery. Here's my point about it. Look, I've no problem with I've a major problem with the prohibition on strikes. But what you've got to do is say, look, is this a strike or is this a deliberate attempt to harass the public? If a strike is grossly, disproportionately damaging to the public, i.e. you've got a £50 dispute on TfL and you've decided to shut down London as a result, then it's only right and proper that the trade unionist members pay damages towards those affected. So let me just say how that would work. So it's perfectly fine for rail drivers to go off on strike, but they will have to pay every single passenger for their taxi journeys as a result of them doing it. That doesn't mean they can't go out on strike. That gives them every right to do it, Nigel.
I
don't think... But no, I tell you why it's not nonsense. Because the reason you are doing it is because you know that you do £1 billion of damage to the economy that has nothing to do with your dispute. You pay the £1 billion.
Well, Don says, I'm a retired railway conductor and RMT member, and I want to point out that these strikes are nothing to do with the drivers. Drivers mainly belong to ASLEF. This strike is RMT. It's about closing booking offices and removing conductors, making trains driver-only operated. So it's, his point there is it's not about drivers doing X, Y, Z and you making them pay for taxes. They would argue it's about safety.
Well, I worked very closely because I worked for the Member of Parliament for Morecambe, and many people watching this will be aware of the Heysham nuclear power station, both of them. We worked very closely with the nuclear...
Let me turn you around. There you go.
Sorry.
I need to be able to see this nice young man next to you as well.
I keep moving. Look, it's just because I'm big, right? What you need is a smaller one here.
Yeah, breathe in.
Get Darren Grimes sat here, you'll be all right.
Anyway, go on.
But I don't know what to do now.
Yeah, go on.
But I was involved with the nuclear trade unionists, and they were brilliant because what they would do is principally be concerned with health and safety issues, which, as you can imagine in nuclear power stations, is important. Look, I don't have a problem with somebody turning around as a rail driver, rail conductor and saying, I'm concerned about safety. My worry is that why is it always the train drivers? Why is it always the rail staff? The reason is because they know they can get away with it. And the reason they can get away with it is because they can shut down the economy. And my argument is, let's stop them from doing that by making them pay the bill.
Well, Liam has written in saying, Michelle, your first speaker talks utter rubbish. He means you, Nigel.
Of course he does.
He says a skeleton.
Thanks, Liam.
Yeah, he says a skeleton staff to cover the strikes to allow movement of people, passengers, is not a huge request. He says their leaders are communists and want to cause maximum disruption for all right and fair-minded people. They don't have the right to do this.
Well, I mean, all I can say to Liam is, yes, they should have the right to do this, and the government are trying to stop them. And yes, there are health and safety concerns, and that would come about by getting rid of 2,500 maintenance workers, which is what they're talking about. We are talking about people who are low paid, not so much train drivers anyway. The point that it comes down to, though, the only way I can see that the government should intervene, and this is rather like happened during the general strike in the 20s, is if food is not getting through, if essential supplies are not getting through to people, it will be hugely inconvenient to passengers not to be able to use trains. But if you actually allow the passengers to use the trains because you break the strike becomes pointless.
What about my right to operate the trains? Why can't the companies bring in their own workers if they want to? I don't have a problem with you withdrawing labour, but you have to give the right of the employer to bring in alternative staff.
Well, then we're in this P&O situation, and the last thing we want is the railways to turn into a P&O. If that's the way industrial relations are going ahead in this country, we really are in trouble.
But the system worked with P&O because they brought in terrible staff and the regulator stopped them from operating the ships. That's fine as far as I'm concerned.
Well,
yeah, they shouldn't have brought them in the first place.
Should have done it in the first place.
But it doesn't bother the passengers because there was a prohibition on them
operating.
Because
the ferries didn't work.
Well, you can get on insurance.
Michael says, Michelle, workers should have the right to strike, but then the employer should also have the right to withdraw their employment. That sentiment coming through at the moment is people are lucky to have jobs, never mind striking. But someone here says, please don't mention my name, call me Joe Bloggs. So Joe Bloggs says, I'm currently working for this certain railway company. We have been working all the way through COVID, sometimes waking up at 3 to 4 a.m. We've had no pay rises in 3 years and the cost of living is going up. Bigger management got over 10 grand pay rises and basically said that if we want one, we'll have to earn it. He ends by putting in big capital letters, this is a disgrace, and if we don't stand up for our rights now, they will soon be going after our pensions. That says Joe Bloggs.
Joe Bloggs is right.
I think the other point is actually that the labour market's changed massively in the last few years. And look at ScotRail. You know, they're struggling to get enough staff. So actually the market partly will determine this. You'll have to pay people more.
Where are we with ScotRail? Is that nationalised now? Or
nationalised, yeah, but they're struggling. They've cut the services by a third because of staff shortages. So I think in the end the market will have something.
They're offering 2.2%.
And train drivers are paid very well anyway.
I'm going to say something that's going to shock it, and everyone's going to jump at me. I believe in privatisation of the railways. At the moment, the railways are principally under the public sector. Those elements that have been put into the privatisation. The reality is the strategic direction, the ticket prices, all of the infrastructure decisions, all of the financing is decided by government. All that happens is you have a sign on the side of your rail car and they employ the drivers and the conductors.
Yeah, it's completely phony.
That is largely irrelevant.
There is no system in the world. There is no system in the world that's privatised. The state does the heavy lifting. We may as well be honest about it. Get it reintegrated.
Yeah, but what you said, remember, is you believe in nationalisation of the railways. Yeah. What I'm saying is it's nationalised right now.
It isn't. It's actually the worst of all worlds now. It's the worst.
Well, that's John Major
silly system,
it's a hybrid.
They play trains with different colours. The heavy lifting's done by the state, and we should be honest about it.
Yeah, well, that's fair.
Hamble says, I'm a nurse and I'm not legally allowed to strike, so surely any other public service, like train drivers, etc., shouldn't be allowed to strike either. Also, lots of people coming through again, as I've just said, another one just about saying you should be grateful to have any job at all. Never mind striking. What do you think to that? Right, going to take a quick break. When we come back, I want to talk to you about tax. Specifically, I am wondering, would you pay more tax if you didn't have to? And by the way, would you try and do everything possible to pay legally as little as you could get away with? The reason I ask is because there's a bunch of millionaires who apparently want to pay more, are desperate to pay more. Well, why don't you just volunteer and go pay more then? We'll have that and more after the break.
Coming up on Dan Wootton tonight, were COVID mRNA vaccines the silver bullet they were touted as? The head of a new study into their impact on mortality, Professor Christine Stabile-Ben, reveals her bombshell findings live. Is there any justification for keeping face masks in healthcare settings? Dr. Gary Sidley, who's authored an open letter to UK leaders and the NHS calling for them to be axed, joins me as his campaign attracts thousands of supporters. And as ever, I'll break down the headlines with my superstar panel. Former Daily Star editor Dawn Neeson, Conservative commentator Calvin Robinson, and author and journalist Rebecca Reid. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV, on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you. And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Michelle Dewberry. This is Dewbs Co. Welcome back. Keeping me company until 7 o'clock tonight. My panel, the leader of the Social Democratic Party, William Clouston, commentator Andre Walker, and Nigel Nelson, the political editor of the Sunday People. I told him, ladies and gentlemen, Andre stopped turning his back. He didn't stop turning his back, so look, he's gone to the end.
He's on the noise.
All I've done is been fat. That's it. You're discriminating against me.
He's gone to the end, and I've told him if he doesn't pack it in, he can go sit in the next room. So, there you go. This is better. I can see everybody now.
There's nothing wrong.
Yes, there you go. We told him, ladies and gentlemen. Right, let's talk tax, shall we? Do you want to pay more tax? Do you think you pay enough tax? A group of millionaires are lobbying the great and the good at the World Economic Forum this week to ask them to let them pay more tax. tax. Their motive is to help reduce the gap between the richest in the world and the poorest. That's a very noble cause, some might say, but one of the things that I don't get is that you already can, if you want to pay more tax voluntarily, you already can write a cheque. And when you look at how much money has been raised that way, by the way, over the recent years, it's been hardly anything at all. So all of these people that sit there begging, please, sir, let me pay more, don't talk nonsense. You can pay more already. But that aside, William, do you think the wealthy pay more enough tax? Do you think we should be taxing them more?
It's too easy to avoid tax. And on a broader question, the question of inequality generally is inequality is getting worse. I mean, we're a very, very divided society now. And I think a divided society isn't a happy society. So I think there are many, many loopholes which the wealthy can take advantage of. You've got offshore use of income and resources, and it's a little bit too easy. I think the broader cultural problem is that too many people, to use David Goodhart's expression, too many people are anywheres, and you got these people that are literally tourists in their own countries. I think it would be better if more of us had a sort of more rooted approach, a more domestic approach to life. And if you work and you get your prosperity from a state, you should pay tax in that state.
Nigel?
Hear, hear.
I bet I know what you're going to say. I'm going to ask you, do you think the wealthy should pay more tax? If you say no to that question, I'm literally going to fall off my own chair.
You would do, and I won't.
Oh, there you go.
And of course they should. The people who should pay the most tax are the people who can most easily afford it. So what you have here is a group called Patriotic Millionaires.
Yep.
It's an international group. I was talking to the British branch of it a few weeks ago, and they have written to Rishi Sunak and said, can we pay more tax? And Rishi Sunak said what you did. No, I'm not going to increase your tax, you pay enough. What you should do is you should send any money in that you fancy, just write me a cheque.
And how many did?
Hang on, their point is that's not the way to make it work. People sending money in has ranged from 4p to £600,000 in the last 20 years and made about 8 million. Their argument is that anybody with, say, 3.5 million, and there are 119,000 people in this country with that, if they paid a 5% wealth tax on that, you could pay for the national insurance increase twice over, you could employ 50,000 more nurses, and build 35,000 more homes.
So
That's what they want to do.
So let me just ask you a couple of questions. Because first and foremost, if I was Rishi Sunak, I would push back on these people. If they were saying to me, oh, sending in a cheque is not the answer, what I would say is, no, but it's an immediate compromise. So if you're really desperate to pay tax...
It doesn't make any difference.
Whilst, of course it does. If you're putting extra cash into...
No, they're talking about raising sort of 43 billion. This is what they can do through their wealth. And, you know, I mean, one of them I was talking to was saying, look, I live off my wealth. I don't even pay national insurance on the basis of that. I want to help people who are struggling because they do.
So send your cheques in then in the meantime. But let me just ask you this before I bring Andre in. £3.5 million. Now, if you're watching this, I don't know, I'll pick Hull because it's where I'm from. £3.5 million sounds like an awful lot of money. If you're in London, for example, £3.5 million, I'd be interested to know what that means. Is that liquid cash? Is that assets? Because some people could have bought a home for, I don't know, 500 grand, and it's now worth.
Some of these are investments that they're getting money back on. And the actual 3.5 million, it's at least that. You're talking about people who will have 50, 60, 70 million. And this group of people have got together and said, we can afford to pay more tax. We would like to. Rishi, please tax us more. And he refused.
Nigel, it's easier to tax a flow, though. Do you accept? It's easier to tax an income flow than a stock. It's, you know,
without a doubt. And here's the reason. If this phone is worth £100 and you decide to tax me 5% and I don't have the £5 in my pocket, what do? Sell it? And a lot of this wealth is hypothetical. So we often turn around and we say, oh, Elon Musk is, I don't know, 10 billion richer than he was last year. But that's 10 billion on a hypothetical increase in the value of his stock, which he has no intention of selling. So he hasn't actually got the money in his bank account. I think this is incredibly dangerous. And I'll tell you what's incredibly dangerous more than anything else. This concept. We had a court ruling decades ago, probably 100 years ago, by the High Court. You do not have a duty to maximise your tax. You have a right to pay whatever the minimum tax burden is. And increasingly, we are becoming a society where arbitrarily the government, the Chancellor can say, oh, I don't like how much you pay in tax. I think you should pay more. We found it already, bizarrely, with the Order of the British Empire, where if you do not pay an amount of tax that the HMRC likes, even if you behaved legally, you're prohibited from receiving an honour. Enter the famous footballer you and I have talked about before, right? But who, by the way, has not committed any offence whatsoever.
What about a windfall tax on the oil giants who are making so much money?
But the big problem is with all of this, you talk about loopholes and then you create new ones by saying, let's have a windfall tax on this. In reality, no, but it is a loophole, because the reality is when you tax somebody more for something than you do for somebody else, you've created a loophole by definition. The reality is we need a simple. It's not a loophole. We need a simple taxation system, and most importantly than anything else, you have to admit that wealthy people pay a huge amount in tax. The problem we've got in this country is the waste. I mean, if you turn around and you say, I want to pay more tax for public services, have you seen the amount we tip down the toilet in local government on pensions and other things? It's a waste of money.
That's a separate...
Well, it's not a separate... Let me bring Nigel in on the windfall tax thing, because one of my concerns that I've got about tax sometimes is that I feel when we converse about tax, it almost becomes... like a football, a political and emotional football. So people will say stuff like, tax the wealthy, yay, and it'll be, to me, often formed out of jealousy rather than any kind of really
sometimes it does come
economic policy. And when we talk about windfall taxes, one of my concerns that I've got here is that we don't have a taxation or an economic policy in this country where we just randomly decide to pick and choose, right, today, you've made a bit of dough, I'll have a little bit of that extra on top. We have a tax structure, whether you agree with it or you disagree with it, it's a different discussion. We have a defined tax structure, and then as a business, you know that these are the confines and boundaries and barriers in which I operate. When a government then decides, actually, you've had a touch of luck there, so I'll have a little bit of that, it disrupts that kind of stability of the market in which you operate as a business. And it would make you slightly reluctant going forward, because now you're operating from a certain territory into an uncertain territory. And by the way, when we talk about windfall taxes, why do we seem to just draw the line at the oil and gas? Because delivery companies had a huge boost in profits over COVID. People are sitting at home. Food takeaway places, they had a boost in profits. Pharmaceutical companies, don't even get me started on them. Testing companies. So why, if you want a windfall tax, do you niche in just on energy companies?
Because it's energy. The cost of energy is the biggest problem facing people when it comes to the cost of living crisis. So at the moment, because the price of oil has gone up, the energy companies have made vast profits. Even they admit that. They're just awash with money. So to give them a windfall tax of 10% over a year, you're only talking about a year, that would help people with their energy bills. And when it comes down to dealing with the delivery companies, yeah, let's do that. The trouble with them, of course, is that they are offshore.
But Nigel, what Michelle's point was, I think, much more sophisticated than the answer you've given, which was this. If suddenly you can be incredibly arbitrary about this and just decide, I fancy your money, I fancy your money, then actually you come across the major problem with taxation, and the reason why Conservatives like me defend billionaires, because time and time again the principle is established with the billionaires, but the other guy is you. When people are saying tax more, the other guy is you.
Probably not. We're not.
Very quick as you possibly can, because I've only got about 10 seconds.
Well, we're not talking about the causes of the inequality in the first place, which is chief executives getting paid 60 times more than their employees, and that's wrong, and people know it's wrong.
Well, there you go, and that, my friends, is a debate for another day. But for now, thank you very much for your time, panel. KF says, I don't know your name, you just identify as KF. You say, Michelle, making the rich poor will not make the poor rich. There you go. That's it from me for another night. You have a great evening, and I will see you tomorrow. Coming up next is Nigel Farage. Nigel, good evening to you.
Michelle,
what have you got for us?
Well, it's Operation Get Boris. It's in full flow. The Grey Report expected to be out tomorrow morning, and they're all coming out of the woodwork talking about all sorts of things that were going on in Downing Street and the Prime Minister's lack of authority and bad example. But as the rest of mainstream media appear to be part of Operation Get Boris, we're going to give Peter Bone, one of his biggest defenders, the chance to stand up and make the case as to why the PM must stay. Energy prices to go up by a further £830 per average household. What on earth are we to do? And go green, go hungry. A case study in Sri Lanka as to why organic farming has proved to be a disaster. Prince Charles, I really hope you're watching. And Dr. Madsen Piri of the Adam Smith Institute joins me. I ask him, is there any hope for free markets, or have they gone forever?
Hello, I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. Further showers for many during the next 24 hours. More prolonged rain, especially in the west as we start off Wednesday, and increasingly windy during Wednesday and Thursday. A number of low-pressure systems are affecting our weather at the moment. One clearing away to the northeast during the rest of the day and overnight, and then another low turning up for the start of Wednesday from the west. That means it will be fairly changeable, fairly unsettled, but Tuesday's showers clearing away from the east through the evening, and then clear skies for much of the night, especially for the Midlands, East Anglia and the southeast, where temperatures will fall into the single figures, perhaps low single figures in some sheltered spots, whilst much of Scotland, Northern Ireland, Western England as well as Wales turns cloudy through the night, and it'll be a wet and windy start to Wednesday. Those winds reaching gale force around exposed parts of northern Scotland. The rain in Scotland, Northern Ireland, northern and western England as well as Wales turns to showers by the afternoon. And after a sunny start for East Anglia and the southeast, it turns cloudier and breezier by the afternoon. But temperatures still hovering around average for the time of year. 19 in London, 16 to 18 Celsius generally elsewhere. And any rain peters out through the evening with clear spells for many at first on Wednesday night. But through the early hours, once again, cloud and some outbreaks of rain turn up across Northern Ireland, parts of southwest Scotland, northwest England and North Wales. Elsewhere, showers continuing for northern Scotland, clear spells for the southeast corner as we start off Thursday. Another breezy day to come. Again, the risk of gales for northern Scotland, along with some fairly lively showers here. A slice of cloud and outbreaks of rain through central parts. Brighter and drier to the far south and southeast, where it will be turning warmer. And then that warmer, drier weather in the south spreads to most parts by Saturday.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great